Hi everyone, we're going to get started. So I have the pleasure of introducing you guys April Carroll. She is the Vice President of Research and Development at Arrow Farms, a high-tech vertical farming company that grows produce indoors in the heart of communities around the globe. As a pioneer in the field of plant phenomics, which is the study of all observable characteristics of a plant, Carroll utilizes advanced imaging technologies, molecule analysis, and data science to model plant growth and development, understanding how plants respond to their environments. Her foundational training in basic plant biology, paired with a passion for high-throughput technology, have been used to enable discoveries for companies such as DuPont Pioneer and Syngenta. Carroll previously was Purdue Director of Phenomics, where she coordinated research at the first field phenotyping facility in North America and a world-class controlled environment research facility. She also led development on a data platform, Plant Science Researchers, Smarter Agriculture. And today she will be presenting a talk titled Plants Can't Pack Up and Move, How Can We Help Them Thrive? So please take a moment to silence all electronic devices. Don't put them away. Please hashtag or tweet for Dawn and Doom.
Thank you so much. Well, I have to say it's really wonderful to be back here at Purdue today, and I really feel like I'm home. And getting an opportunity to see so many familiar faces, but also so many people that I haven't met before that I know are here. Rick and Jason and Chris and all of you would be here, no matter what I was talking about. Adam, it's great to see you as well. But seeing all these new faces in here that hopefully are here to learn a little bit more about plants, maybe some aspiring plant scientists. I would be happy to talk with any of you that are interested in careers in plant science. With Arrow Farms or studying here at Purdue, they're really great places to do plant biology all over the country. And so really I'd like to help give back to the community as well as to advance the research. And really that's what I'm here today to talk about. And hopefully we can move forward towards the dawn scenario. So there will be no doom in this talk. We are all about the dawn. So the title here, that plants can't pack up and move, so how can we help them thrive? It's one of these fundamental principles around plant science that plants are sessile organisms. They can't move. They put roots down in the ground, and animals, they can go hide from whatever kind of environmental conditions might be pestering them at the time. If it's raining, we can go indoors. Animals can burrow or hide. Or they can move towards areas where there's more food or more water or whatever kind of nutrients they might need at the time. Plants have this kind of sessile stature where they can't move, so they've had to adapt to their environment much better than animals do because, again, they can't pick up and run away. So this talk is going to be kind of in two parts. We're going to talk about some biology of how we're working to help plants to learn more about plants and to help them thrive under extreme environments. So maybe there is a little doom there. But then also about how we would be growing plants in alternative environments to help kind of reduce our footprint and our impact in terms of modern agriculture and how we are better stewards of the planet. So just a bit about my history, since I maybe have a little bit of a unique path. I'm currently the Vice President of R&D at Arrow Farms, which is the world's largest leafy greens vertical farm. This is a picture of our new farm in Newark, New Jersey on the top here. I was just up until a few months ago Director of Phenomics here at Purdue, where I worked quite a bit on our platform called Smarter Agriculture, and I was also chair of the International Plant Phenotyping Network and the North American Plant Phenotyping Network. So trying to bring phenotyping and phenomics, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a minute. What is phenomics and what is phenotyping? Before that, I worked at DuPont Pioneer, which is a seed company producing corn, soybean, and other varieties of seed. And you can see here, this is our high throughput phenotyping facility where we have corn plants grown in pots. These plants can get up to 4 meters tall, so taller than this ceiling, in pots, moving around on conveyor belts, going through imaging cabinets where there's high resolution, really kind of fancy imaging to really understand how the plants are responding to stress. So we've taken some of the lessons from that, and we're actually building a new phenotyping facility, which is just characterizing plants in any way that we can and kind of aggregating all the data together. We have a controlled environments phenotyping facility that's coming online here very shortly. Chris Hoagland in the back is our phenotyping facility coordinator, so if you have any questions about that facility, Chris, if you want to just wave a little bit right there, maybe a little plug. Jason Adams, right next to him, manages our field phenotyping facility, the Indiana Corn and Soybean Innovation Center. So really trying to bring our basic understanding of plants from cradle to grave, really understanding kind of the most basic fundamentals under really controlled conditions, all the way out to fields where we're flying drones and driving farm equipment that has, really complex sensor networks over fields to really understand their biology. I guess I should mention also my background in basic science and automation, really kind of a passion for delivering automation and using it in a way where we work with engineering, we work with plant biology to help enable other discoveries. So the precedent for why I became a plant biologist, this idea that I was going to save the world somehow, which I think every ambitious teenager has an idea in some way or another that we're going to improve the world, make things better. And I discovered plant biology later on in my college career. And really, instead of being pre-medical, where I was sure that I was going to cure cancer or AIDS or something like that, I actually started talking with plant biologists and realizing that the work that they were doing with this new field of molecular biology, making GMOs, which almost has a negative connotation today, really is a positive technology. Like I said, no doom, only dawn. Looking at the positives that we can get from this technology, how we can safely improve plants, make them more tolerant to the environment, either using traditional breeding, where you cross one variety with another, or if you take a gene from one variety of a plant and put it into another variety to help be a little bit more targeted about that. So really just understanding more about biology. And the foundation for that is around this unprecedented population growth. We have estimates now coming in that by the year 2050, we expect to have 9 billion people on the planet. And we need to feed all of those people with the same amount of arable land. So we really aren't looking into many new environments or new land. Pretty much what we have is what we've got. Maybe there's a few things we can do out in the oceans with some kind of new technology there. There is active research going on in those fields, but in terms of traditional land-based agriculture, we're kind of at a limit. We also have impending climate change issues that are really going to start manifesting more and more. Things like hurricanes have always been around. We've always had tornadoes. We've always had drought. But the hypothesis is now that as the ocean temperatures increase and as we have kind of this overall blanketed increase in ocean temperature, we're going to have more humidity. And these are not, there's not really a dispute about this data. There are some kind of discussions about what the implications will be in terms of, really extreme events or how often we're going to see more hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that. But this is really happening. The ocean is warmer, and we are going to see more water vapor in the atmosphere that's going to lead to more rain. And really, with that increased rain, we're going to have more storms, and storms are going to have effects on agriculture. So in this example, we expect to see more frequent extreme climate events. Not just incremental increases in temperature or rainfall. If it was just a 2-degree average temperature increase across the globe, plants might actually like that a little bit warmer temperatures, especially corn. They were getting more light, a little bit extra rainfall and a higher temperature. But we're talking things like we've seen in Houston and in Puerto Rico, where we have just entire stand loss. And this example was taken last year in Iowa, where a storm came through and just leveled an entire field. So plants, no matter how resistant they are to, say, flooding or damage, if there's a 100-mile-an-hour wind, it's a pretty good chance that they're going to get knocked over, and we're not just going to see a reduction in yield, we're going to see zero yield. And so I mentioned this in the zip trip this morning. I know at least a couple of you were tuned in for that. But this scale of climate damage, of weather impact, it stands to increase the cost of food in the U.S. and in developed nations. It's probably going to decrease our food quality, increase our fuel costs. But in developing countries, we're expecting to see people will be starving. And really, as a plant scientist, I feel like it's my responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to ensure food security for not just the U.S., but also for developing nations and really our brothers and sisters around the world. So in addition to the climate change, we also have kind of poor soils, water scarcity. This is occurring in a lot of high population areas around the globe, and I'll talk a little bit about, at the end of the talk, about how AeroFarms, my new company, is approaching this type of problem. We've also lost about a third of our arable land in the last 40 years. It takes about 500 years to replace 4 inches of topsoil, so using natural means. So unless we're reconditioning our soil and really improving those, we need to look towards alternative growing environments, either indoors or by improving the soil with more active management. We also have contamination from heavy metals in the soil. These are things that are really hard to get back out of the soil, that plants, the roots are really just very well adapted devices for taking up ions from the soil environment. In this case, if we overpollute our soils, the plants take up those ions like crazy, and we end up with heavy metals in our plants that are toxic to us as we're eating the plants. So we've got some environmental issues that we need to overcome, but I'm very positive that the innovations in plant biology and in environmental science are hopefully keeping up pace, and that we're going to be able to mitigate these effects. The use of agricultural chemicals is something that we're also working heavy on with plant phenotyping. So trying to understand exactly what's going on in a field. So a phenotype is any kind of a measurable trait. So in this case, we could have drones flying around with cameras to observe what's going on in small areas of the field and maybe detect a small outbreak of a pest. Say you would have a corn earworm or a rootworm or something of that effect. So if we could detect that early, we could spray in a very localized fashion and treat with agricultural chemicals, either on aircraft or with robotics. And then we could impact much more. With our watersheds, we wouldn't have to do as much spray across such a wide area. Food waste is another issue. So having big data powering these new Internet of Things platforms, it's kind of a buzzword lately, but really just connecting our trucks with our deliveries, with our pickups, with when the food is ready or when it's been sitting in a cooler for too long. Having all this connectivity around really smart devices like cars and trucks and shipping and warehousing equipment is really important for reducing food waste, so that our supply chain, that we're able to get the food that people need to them in the places where they're at. So at AeroFarms, and this may be new for some of my old friends and colleagues here at Purdue, I wanted to share kind of the mission behind the company. Really looking at operating environmentally responsible farms. We're operating around the world and bringing safe, nutritious, and delicious food. So reducing that supply chain by growing in the heart of big urban centers and really kind of bringing the farm to the consumer so that we can have less of a carbon footprint with shipping and trafficking. And also overcoming some of those other issues like soil toxicity and things that I mentioned before. So I'll get back to this a little bit more towards the end of the talk, but if you have questions about urban farming, vertical growing, I'm going to talk a little bit more about phenotyping and how we learn about plants using these new technologies. So like I said before, phenotyping is kind of a scientific jargon word, but we're going after anything that we can characterize. If we're looking at the chemistry within a plant, if we're looking at proteins, if we're looking at the genetic code, all of that is part of what we call a phenotype, so everything observable. And we use some special cameras called hyperspectral imaging, where we can look at subtle details about a subject. So in the top panel, this is what our eye would see, and this is an example of how different animals would see the same subject or the same specimen. So these flowers, when you look at them in just the regular visible range that our eyes see well, is just really in 3 colors, red, green, and blue. On the bottom panel, if you look in the ultraviolet range, you can actually see there's quite a bit more there that our brain just kind of made up the rest of it, and we really weren't able to see the entire spectrum. So we've got this kind of landing pad for the pollinators that's kind of evolved at the same time between the flower and the insect that pollinates it, that's really directing those little critters in to say, hey, come pollinate me. Here's the landing pad. Land right here. This is where my pollen's at. And so with these animal eyes, we all have just little sensors inside of our eyes, rods and cones. We have different types of rods and cones, different proportions, where, in our case, we see red, green, and blue. I just recently learned a few weeks ago that clams can see like 174 different colors, which is really, really good in the animal world. But different spiders and bees can see 6 or 8 different wavelengths really well. So in our case, we're just really good at looking at green. We are born to be botanists. We were born and evolved in plant canopies, like most primates. We've kind of evolved in this kind of jungle, prairie, savanna type environment so we see green really well, so farmers can actually walk their fields and look like with a really discriminating eye to see, hey, there's a little bit of a nutrient deficiency over there. The plants are just a slight shade of yellow. And that's really to tell our community that, hey, those plants over there, they don't look so good. Let's go forage over in this area where the plants are a little bit healthier. So we've kind of taken it to the next level. So with this, the dawn or doom scenario, we've really tried to quantify exactly how the plant, all the pigments in the plant that are not visible to our eye, that are within the visible range. And what we use, one of the kind of the workhorse technologies, is called hyperspectral imaging. So in this example, we're just looking at all the visible light, and we're trying to look at what's reflecting back from a sample. So in this case, I kind of superimposed a little goofy corn plant over here just to illustrate this concept, that if we're taking a regular digital image, we're just taking red, green, and blue, which works fine for our eyes, like I said, and we have, you know, an inkjet printer that has cyan, magenta, and yellow. It's the same thing, red, green, and blue, 3 colors. Our brain makes up the rest and blends it into what we see as the rainbow. So in this case here, you've got red, green, and blue would be just 3 slices from this stack. When you take a hyperspectral image, you take 1,000 slices and you put them all together in one stack. And so you can imagine that that generates a whole lot of data. Probably, you know, 99% of it is just maybe some noise, some kind of standard pigments that don't really change. But we're after that, kind of that needle in a haystack that might give us some kind of an indicator about whether a plant is stressed or not. And so this is an example here of how a visible spectrum might change in stress plants versus healthy plants. So this is just an example of again, a spectral imager where you're looking at all of the visible light within this range here from red to blue. And then we have the infrared over here, and you can actually see quite a bit about healthy plants versus stress plants within the visible range, and then also in the near infrared. So we do quite a bit of work with this, and I won't go into too much more detail, but it's a really exciting area of study that Purdue is excelling at. We've got researchers in different engineering departments, different biology groups that are all working together in multidisciplinary teams, and it's just really exciting to be able to have been a part of this and to continue to come back and visit and learn more and more about how we might apply what we're learning into the vertical farming industry. Okay, so this is an example just of some of the automated crop diagnostics that I've used in the past. These are images from DuPont Pioneer where we were doing automated phenotyping in a number of different species, rice, corn. This is a picture of a corn plant with some photosynthetically active tissue highlighted, so that's why it's red there. A wheat plant, so this is growth and development of wheat over time, which is particularly tricky because the leaves overlap so much. To really be able to look at growth and development and counting the number of leaves is pretty hard in that plant. It's a little easier in sunflower where it has a really nice stalk, easy, stable, and then the leaves, if you measure them from the side, you can count the number of leaves. If you measure them from the top, you can actually get a pretty good area of the leaves. But you know, each species has different challenges, like soybean that grows in this bushy canopy, so we actually have to tie it up and train it up a stake. And then pull the plants out individually and take a look at what the growth and development looks like in imaging. Sorghum, which if you didn't know that was sorghum, it looks just like corn. It's a very close relative. We use sorghum to learn more about genes that are important in corn. And sorghum, it's a relative. It's very tolerant to drought environments. So one of the big research programs here at Purdue is around looking at sorghum as a source for genetic material that might be important to help corn withstand drought. Another project here at Purdue is working on tomato and looking at how tomatoes might become more disease resistant. And so using kind of this advanced imaging, using genetics, and using all the kind of molecular studies to really understand how plants become more resistant to really critical pathogens and pests. So this is an example. I'm gonna go through this relatively quickly. There's a lot here. So what I wanted to show is just that it's important to calibrate our images. It's important to understand kind of the basics of what a nutrient limitation or what a nutrient deficiency looks like in plants, so that when you go over a field that you're not intending to cause a nutrient deficiency, you know what it looks like. So this is like building a control, right? So you have experiment, you have your hypothesis, you want to prove your hypothesis one way or the other, but you also need to have standards inside your experiment of things that if you're using images to look for sick plants versus healthy plants, you need to have something where you have a reference inside that experiment that says this is a sick plant, this plant doesn't have enough nitrogen. So in this case, we did some really kind of fine resolution. So this is the concentration in nitrogen that was delivered to the plants, from ones in pink that had no nitrogen at all the way up to 8 millimolar, which we were calling kind of optimal. So that would be kind of what the target dose of nitrogen, and then every little flavor in between. So what you see, if you just focus on the pink bars here, when the plants are young, so this is every week we imaged all of these plants. There were, I believe, about 30 or 40 plants per treatment. The plants get a lot smaller. So they just basically stop growing, and then they kind of kind of level off and actually kind of shrink a little bit over time. They're just quite sick. But there's quite an improvement even just with a little bit of nitrogen added after the fact. So so if you have your house plants at home and you just water them with plain water, and after 6 months or so they really look bad, give them a little Miracle Grow. A little bit. Just water them every time with a low solution in Miracle Grow. Just a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of fertilizer really helps. So the same thing with plant size. Oh, I'm sorry, this was greenness, so they were becoming less green over time. The plant size, you could actually see the stature more kind of in terms of like a wilting. But anyway, the take home from this is that we now have a really well-developed model of what nutrient deficiency looks like, so that we can then use that to reference our later experiments. And it turns out that a lot of these pests and pathogens, or even drought, sometimes has some symptoms that look similar to nutrient deficiency. So we did the same thing for drought studies. So this is an example, again, from DuPont Pioneer, where their commercial hybrid that's quite tolerant to drought, called Aquamax, compared to a conventional hybrid. And these are under very high drought stress conditions in California, in Northern California near Sacramento. And so the Aquamax hybrid withstands this high stress much better. So we kind of replicated this experiment in the greenhouse, and we used different levels of drought, again, to say, well, what does a drought stress plant actually look like? And we used that as a control inside of this experiment, and used our hyperspectral imaging. And so once we kind of trained the model a little bit, we're actually able to distinguish the more tolerant from the susceptible varieties, and we can use that then as a trait development platform. Okay, so if anybody here knows Mitch Tynstra, Melba Crawford, Ed Delp, Ayman Habib, this is part of their Terra program here, which is a Department of Energy program to enhance sorghum as a biofuel crop. And so what they're doing is they're really trying to advance the field of plant phenomics in a field environment. So this is a picture of a farm out at Acre in 2016. And this is on August 9th. Everything was looking good. So this is just a heat map. So it's artificial color flown over with a drone, looking at plants and their height. So the blue color is the ground, and then the deep red here is the tallest plants that are about 5 meters tall. So it's about 15 foot tall. And so these plants over here, this is corn. And then these are different varieties of sorghum. So they have very diverse height, and this was actually the purpose of the experiment. And so you can see these little plots over here as well, just a whole bunch of diversity of plant height. But what's really interesting about this is that in between, I believe it was August 11th or 12th, a huge hail, wind, rainstorm came through and actually leveled a good bit of these research fields, which was absolutely devastating to me as a plant biologist. Like, oh my gosh, our experiment, everything's lost. And the engineers, I love working with engineers, because the engineers, they see kind of a showstopper problem as a gift. They're excited, like, oh wow, okay, well now let's model what plant height and drought tolerance and severe weather tolerance look like. So, again, no doom, dawn. This is all about positive, right? You can see these plots right here. That this plot on this side was nice and tall, about the same as this plot before the storm. But after the storm, this guy was completely leveled, so it's down at the ground level in that blue color. But this one actually stood up really well compared to the rest of the varieties, quite a few of them that were just completely knocked down. So now what Dr. Tynstra and others from that group are working on is to identify, are there any genes in this plot, in this variety of sorghum, that might help us to increase the standability? Maybe there's some sort of a tolerance that we can convey, either by traditional breeding or again by molecular techniques, that might help other plants, other species even, to kind of reap the benefit of that standability. So it's a really exciting kind of a real-world example of this cutting-edge research that might then lead to some discoveries and help facilitate plant breeding. Okay, so the next chapter here then is, like I mentioned, helping plants adapt to their environment, but also kind of expanding the environments that the plants can be grown in. So this is an example of a vertical farm with some technology from, again, my new company called Arrow Farms. So the concept is to grow these baby leafy greens indoors, very short cycle. They only grow for 16 days, and they grow on a cloth growing media, and they are sprayed from underneath with all the nutrient solutions that they need, and they're actually misted from underneath the cloth. The cloth acts as a barrier so that the nutrient solution doesn't get up on the leaves, so we don't even actually have to wash our product. You can just eat it straight off of the cloth. We don't use any pesticides, so it's even better than organic. So this is kind of the concept behind the growing media, and then this is what this looks like. So you can see the cloth up top. This is a red romaine lettuce, and then you have this nice root canopy underneath that gets sprayed. You can see some of the nutrient solution dripping off. And so then we have a harvesting machine that comes through with a big bandsaw blade. It's actually kind of cool to watch. Just zips right across that canopy. A conveyor belt takes the leaves up, and then the stems and the roots go off underneath the machine, and then they can be harvested again for alternative uses. So we're still kind of actively researching what to do with the roots and the stems. But right now we have a program where we're testing using the stems as part of a pesto. So kind of grinding up those stems and making like a part of a basil pesto, especially with arugula and kale, things that have a lot of flavor. And then the roots are being used as filler for dog bones. So it's a naturally derived product. It makes a lot of sense that could be put into other food products or other material streams. So that's actually kind of one of the fun little side projects that I get to work on. Okay, so the plants are grown all indoors under artificial lighting. We actually, this is kind of a press photo of these red, white, and blue LEDs that if those of you who attended or viewed the zip trip this morning, Dr. Carrie Mitchell in the horticulture department was one of the pioneers in developing these for the NASA space program. So these types of growing systems were developed to grow plants in space. The cost is now down low enough that it's actually affordable to grow plants on the earth in warehouses and big shelving racks in urban centers. And so this is what the vertical farm looks like. This is the world's largest leafy greens farm. This is in Newark, New Jersey. I get to walk in here every day and look way, way up. This is 44 feet tall. It's just absolutely massive. And growing different varieties of baby leafy greens on different levels under these, like I said, these growth programs that they're all misted from underneath with this cloth and this aeroponic system. So it's really, really cool stuff, and there's a lot of kind of cutting edge science going on. But there are also some challenges. So these challenges, again, as a plant biologist, I'm used to working with corn and soybeans, which have a very long cycle time. You kind of have time to test some changes, see how the plants react. I only have 16 days with this, so I have to get conditions if I want to change something. I've got to find a good way to change that, with a hypothesis that, if I increase magnesium, I'm going to have, improved yields, and then I've got to have a good way to measure that. So it's such a kind of a continuous ongoing thing. We're harvesting every day, working in 2 shifts. So it's just a tremendous amount of product and a tremendous amount of data. So we're trying to optimize growth conditions, work on early detection, which is where the phenotyping comes in, and then take quick and decisive action towards an end goal of either increasing yields, increasing nutrients, improving the taste, and even we have some research going on where we're working on using lighting to change the color. So having a nice red romaine lettuce, if you hit that plant with some blue light at the end of its life cycle for a day or two, the thing reddens up just like it's getting a suntan. So, and it's natural. It's those beneficial anthocyanin compounds that people talk about. You need to get more of these red wine pigments in our diet. Personally, I'd rather have wine, but it's nice with a little green salad. And so really trying to enhance the nutritional qualities of these greens is a really interesting research question for me as a plant biologist. So as kind of I'm going to label myself an honorary data scientist, if that's okay with Rick and Pat and those of you real data scientists in the room. Really taking biology, understanding, this is a Mizuna green here, looking at kind of the edges of the leaves to really just understand the fundamentals of how the plants grow and develop, which is really my comfort zone. But then expanding that out a little bit more into the environment. So how do we maybe make small or large changes to improve the growth of those plants? And then all the supporting mechanical systems and operational systems that all require information technology really to move all of this forward. And so it's really similar to the work that we're doing here at Purdue. It's a kind of a natural transition in a natural collaborative environment where we're working on looking at the Internet of Things. And so in our case, it could be cars, or it could be trays of baby leafy greens, or it could be a truck that's hauling it off to the Whole Foods market. So this Internet of Things concept really is a very kind of a living, breathing organism. I found this little graphic on Computer Weekly where I saw the fan at first, and then all the lighting and all of the heating and the cooling, and we have appliances washing our cloths and cameras taking pictures of our greens. It was almost like, did they make this for us? It's really beautiful. If you want, I can pause on this one while she's drawing. So anyway. So we've taken, again, this concept of active management. So this is a representation of the grow towers. It's just kind of a fun little cartoon, but just showing, when the lights are on, when the lights are off, how much airflow are they getting, what's being watered when, with what nutrient solution. Do we have any special programs going on, light programs or growth recipes or anything? Really managing all of the data within this very large farm. And then taking this from the large farm, this is actually our 9th farm, expanding to new farms that'll be going into urban centers. The next one will be Camden, New Jersey. We have investors in Dubai and in China. So managing the operations and the logistics, that if we're, kind of the analogy of being McDonald's, if we're going to franchise out, have farms in other locations that are either run by our people or collaborators, that they're the ones making the fries on the daily basis. So I'm going to have a green salad with fries and a glass of wine for dinner now that we've had this discussion, and it sounds delicious. Okay, so AeroFarms today has grown over 300 varieties of leafy greens, herbs, and microgreens. Currently we have a product line of 6 that we grow for production, but we have a lot more capability, and this is something that I'm interested in expanding even further. We're using 95% less water than traditional field agriculture while achieving 130 times the productivity in the same land area of traditional field farming. We have commercial relationships with major retailers. Like I mentioned, we have Whole Foods, Fresh Express, or Fresh Direct, where you can get mail order groceries, and also through local produce distributors that are selling leafy greens out to restaurants and salad bars and things like that. We've raised over $50 million in capital, and we have a strong investor backing for future expansion. So this includes automation to an even higher degree than we already are, as well as expanding into new markets. So really the target market is any community that has greater than 1 million people that has the interest in baby leafy greens, which turns out is most of these large population centers. There is a market. So just being strategic about where that expands to, and also with the kind of the market forces, which is something new that I'm learning a lot about very, very, very quickly. So another kind of core values piece of the company is partnering with the community. So this is the new facility that you saw, the world's largest vertical farm when they broke ground. And then also with bringing kind of political presence to our farms. That there's been a lot of community recognition, and last but not least, my very favorite of I guess it's the next slide is my favorite, but kind of improving the community, having the labor force drawn from local areas, having people that were formerly incarcerated or in underrepresented minority groups. We're specifically targeting that with good jobs that are paying a living wage and being able to do some really good, interesting work in these urban farms. That's what I mentioned about the creating jobs here. So not just scientists, but also people that are working in the farms and doing, becoming aero farmers, very much part of the culture. So here's my favorite. So with Michelle Obama, she's actually visiting a charter school in Newark, New Jersey, where they have one of our farms in their cafeteria. So the kids actually grow these baby leafy greens inside the cafeteria, and they harvest them as part of their school lunch program. And so really emphasizing this fresh fruits and vegetables. And so much so having the New York Times and having Mario Batali was in the farm last week, and I was walking through and like, who's that? What's going on over there? Oh, that's Mario Batali, a big famous chef. Oh, okay, great. Well, he's in the way. Get him out of here. So, anyway, so yeah, it's just a really kind of a neat, hot topic that's really interesting for me to be working in. So with that, I'll also make a little plug. I know those of you who know me here already. There's lots of opportunities. AeroFarms is growing, so we are always looking out for top talent, people that have horticulture and growing experience, but also data scientists, engineers. So we're looking for the kind of students that Purdue is producing, that are trained across disciplines, that can work with other people. So if you are that person, or if you know people that might be interested, I would encourage you, please take down my email, or I'll have a little bit of time after the seminar. So I'd be happy to meet you. Okay, and with that, I think I'd be happy to take questions if we do still have time. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. She's got a mic if you want to, just a second, the recording.
How cost competitive is the Aero farm compared to traditional farming?
That's a great question. So we're actually selling at the same price point as other, like Earthbound Organics, as other organic baby leafy green products that are grown in field farming. And the reason for that, I didn't, I guess, I'm relatively new to the company and I'm quite skeptical, and I'm a scientist, I'm not a business person, so I needed to see that this was viable. It was really important to me. The reason that the economics work out is that we're growing in such a small footprint and we're turning so many cycles per year. So in a traditional farm, they might turn 3 or at most 6 or 7 cycles if they're really cranking. We have 22 cycles a year of harvest. So we're able to supply the product seasonally also, so we can sell year round. We're not just limited by growing in California and then shipping cross country to be able to get produce to New Jersey. So we cut out the transportation step. We can grow year round, and we have a continuous supply that we have a lot of control over. And so that's the business model. That's how it works out, and from a productivity standpoint. So that's a great question. So it's on the shelves in New Jersey, like I said, until we can get a farm in every city. But so it sells for $3.99 for a 4-ounce clamshell, which is the exact same price as an organic arugula or baby green mix in the area. Which things are way more expensive in New Jersey than they are in Indiana. Holy cow! But that's another discussion. Yes.
My name is Nicholas Lopez, and I come from New Zealand, where we produce milk grazing cows. How do you see this technology for a country like New Zealand, where we harvest all the pasture from cows?
So you're asking, do I see a market for this as a feed for animals? I think economically, I think this may be a ways off until we can get the cost of electricity down far enough that we can grow in high enough volume. So I think the market is very limited to kind of boutique-y crops, these baby leafy greens, herbs, and microgreens for kind of a discriminating palate. So it's kind of a gourmet, organic type market. So I don't see it as maybe viable for livestock right now. It's not to say that we can't grow indoors and use kind of alternative methods, especially the research in LED technology is really hot. And so, if those engineers can get the costs down even further, and if the electricity, if we get better at harvesting things like alternative energy from sunlight or wind, then that might become more viable. Yeah,
thank you.
It's a great question.
Thank you for presentation today. I'm actually doing my capstone project on vertical farm.
Wonderful.
So I read a lot about vertical farm. I have tons of questions, but I ask one now. So, and I know your largest farm only has 1.25 acre. Is it possible to build an industrial park of vertical farm, or if cooperate with cultured meat or other technology?
Cooperate with what other technology?
Cultured meat.
Cultured meat. Oh yeah. That's a super hot topic that I find just fascinating. So cultured meat of growing meat kind of synthetically in a petri dish has the same nutritional qualities as other beef, but it doesn't have, you know, the kind of the implications of you know, again, you know, raising animals, you know, from you know, rearing all through their stages, right? So I'm just recently learning about this myself. So our acreage right now, we're expanding kind of in modules. So the next kind of stage of farms, right now we're kind of limited by the size of the buildings that we can find that are in these urban areas that have good tax incentives, that have, you know, kind of these you know, kind of up and coming areas that are near urban centers. But we're definitely looking towards new markets. I mean, there's all kinds of indoor growing and kind of bioreactors. There's plant-based vaccines. There's just a ton of indoor growing that's going on that goes well beyond just baby leafy greens and plants. And so kind of, you know, our core business is in our business plan, since we are venture funded, is focusing around getting these yields up and getting our energy costs down and kind of maintaining that equilibrium, showing that we can make money with our core business and then expanding that at the same time. So that's why they brought me in to head up R&D to kind of explore additional markets. So it's a great question. Thanks.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you have a problem with disease. It's essentially a very dense, moist environment, monoculture. Disease would spread very fast, I would think.
Absolutely, yeah. So, so sanitation is our first line of defense against disease. So there's kind of an integrated pest management platform is kind of it's kind of a tech term in I'm not sure what field you're in, but in controlled environments and in the field. So your first level of control is restrictions. So making sure that there's no holes in the building, making sure that people are in gowns and that they're, you can see here that everyone wears gowns and masks and hairnets, and that if they're in the farm, if they come in from outside, you got to scrub your boots, you got to go through 3-step washing, you got to wash your hands, you got to go through an air curtain. So really our best line of defense, since we're not using pesticides, we can't allow tours through the facility because people coming in from outside. Even myself, I don't go through there unless I have a real reason to be in the growing room to take a look at something. So, again, having the no pesticide policy, and kind of, just looking at the organic standards and what organic growers use. Organic growers actually use quite a bit of pesticides. It's one of the myths about organic, that there's these naturally derived chemicals and toxins that can actually kill bacteria or pests or other kind of agents. So, so food safety, it's at the top of everyone's mind all the time. We have to do kind of continuous. We swab and look for the presence of ATP, which is, I guess, a standard food safety thing that I just learned, a few months ago. So it's all about, containing anything that's, a non-target organism. So, but it's really hard. It's really hard, and so again, that's part of why they brought me in. Yeah. Okay, I think we're out of time. All right, great. Thank you, everyone.